Time for business, and I'm pleased to announce Kate Moody is with us. The world's largest economies have escalated their trade dispute, and no one quite knows how to characterise it. So we're going to see if Kate can.
I wouldn't dare to presume, I think, but the big question mark really is this now officially a trade war or not? The rhetoric and tit-for-tat measures have been building for weeks now, and many analysts believe this latest round has taken tensions to another level. 106 American products will now see tariffs raised by 25%, including soybeans, that's the biggest U.S. export to China, as well as cotton and whiskey. That in exchange for the 1,300 Chinese products which will be targeted, including home appliances. $50 billion worth of goods on each side being targeted there. Donald Trump's top economic advisor, though, has been trying to calm tensions outside the White House.
I would take the president seriously on this tariff issue. You know, there are carrots and sticks in life, but he is ultimately a free trader. This is not about trade wars. This is about holding to the laws and the customs of free trade and holding violators to account.
Now for more, we can cross to Washington and speak to Dan Glickman, former Secretary of Agriculture under Bill Clinton, now Senior Counselor at APCO Worldwide. Thanks so much for joining us here on France 24. What's your take on the wording of this latest escalation? Would you say the U.S. and China are now engaged in a trade war? Have they reached a point of no return?
I hope not, and there's some time left, another 6 weeks or so, where there can be some negotiation on these issues. So it's not a done deal yet. It does worry me and does worry a lot of folks, particularly involved in agriculture, where American exports of soybeans and cotton and fruits and vegetables could be dramatically affected. But it's also very interesting that today the stock market in America opened way down and it ended slightly up. So to me, that means that a lot of people in the financial world don't think it's going to happen. We'll see, however.
How worried do you think American farmers are or should be now that so many more products are being targeted?
I think they're quite worried. In the first place, farm prices over the last few years overall have been very weak, not only in the U.S. but globally. And for farmers, soybeans are a huge export. It means that if we would lose those markets, that is, if the markets for soybeans would be 25% higher, which is the level of the tariffs, then that could have a very negative impact on American farmers. And interestingly, a lot of farm states and a lot of farmers were among President Trump's strongest supporters. So let's hope that over the next 6 weeks or so, they can provide some reason so these tariffs don't go ahead as announced earlier this week.
Does the Trump administration have a point about the transfer of technology from foreign firms? Do you think China's abusing the system?
I don't think China comes in with clean hands at all. I mean, I've done a lot of other things. I was head of the Motion Picture Association in the U.S. For a while, and we saw the Chinese, in many cases, either keeping our products out or stealing intellectual property. So, and there's been a lot of issues involving currency manipulation. So the Chinese are not perfect. They do not come in with clean hands at all. But at the same time, you can't do these things on impulse in terms of saying that you're going to announce trade restrictions or massive tariff increases. There's got to be a thoughtful response, and hopefully we'll be able to work this out with the Chinese. But if we don't, it will mean bad things for American agriculture.
Who gets hurt first in this kind of an escalation?
Well, you know, already we have seen some prices fall. Soybeans and corn and other American farm commodities have fallen over the last few days because of the original announcements of tariffs. Agriculture is extremely dependent on open markets, on free trade, on global access. And we sell a lot of agriculture products overseas, and we buy a lot from countries all over the world. So I'd say agriculture gets hit the worst so far. We'll see what happens in the intellectual property and the software business, because that could be impacted as well. But right now, agriculture has the most to lose if these tariffs do go through.
Can any industry come out as a winner?
Well, if you're in China, I think probably some of their industries can come out as a winner. There are usually no winners when you start putting up tariff barriers. And now I understand, again, as you pointed out, that the Chinese have not always played by the same rules that we have or people in Western Europe have. And so there's got to be some recognition that protectionism runs on both sides of the street here. And the Chinese, through their national government, have done a lot of things to protect their industries and their markets. But in the case of agriculture, China has become a very big buyer of American agriculture products. But they also buy a lot from other parts of the world, including Brazil. So if our farmers in the U.S. are to lose from this, it's more likely that the farmers in Brazil will gain from this.
All right, Dan Glickman, former U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, thanks so much for joining us here on France 24.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now, we just got time for a quick look at the markets. Investors have been very worried, of course, about what these tariffs could mean for economies around the world. We saw a sharp sell-off on Wall Street earlier this Wednesday, followed by a fairly massive recovery, tech stocks leading the way. The Dow Jones swung some 700 points throughout the session, finishing up nearly 1%. Boeing was still down about 1%. Airplanes are among the exports that could be impacted. The major European indices closed mostly lower earlier. The DAX hit the hardest because Germany's economy is the most reliant on exports and therefore vulnerable to trade tensions. We'll be following this throughout the rest of the week.
I wouldn't expect anything less. Kate, thank you very much indeed. Kate Moody with The Business. On the other